Oh, say can
Now,
you see?
you know what song I was thinking about the other day?
Hmm.
You remember, um, never mind.
Welcome to Union Fitness Podcast.
All right. Hey, let me fire it up today.
Go for it.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Union Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Kurt. Next to me is Jared. On the left of me is Josh. We're going to throw it down today.
Yeah.
We got some good stuff coming for you. We're getting a little bit more into strength training, specifically the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift, everybody's favorites. But these things, they're not just applying to strength athletes or power lifters. This is applying to anybody who performs these movements, any demographic, any age, condition, everything. We're talking about the setup for each and what we have made our own cues, our own personal cues for either coaching and or performing these lifts, because they don't have to be the same for everybody, as long as the end result is similar, right?
Yeah.
So like Jared's going to have his own cues that he will either use with somebody else or himself. I'm going to have my own, and they've also changed and evolved over the years too. So like 10 years ago, the stuff I was telling myself or telling other people to do, not that it was wrong.
The idea was there.
The idea, my heart was in it.
Exactly.
For whatever it's
There
worth.
was love.
Yeah, but it wasn't as efficient as it is now. And keep in mind, 5 years down the road from now, we're gonna look back and think the same thing. You know what I mean? We're always learning. We're always evolving. So,
No, I'm at my peak.
oh man, I'm not there yet. Tell me how it is.
It's great. I'm almost 30.
All right, so we're gonna jump right into it. We're gonna start with the squat. Now, Jared and I also did a series on this. It was like a year ago, right?
Yeah, on YouTube.
Yeah, we were just in the process of getting ready to reopen, or had we reopened yet?
I think, no, we were open, I believe, and it was like just before COVID hit. Right?
Dude, I don't know. It's been the
We're gonna have
craziest
to
year
check
ever.
the dates.
But go back on our YouTube channel and you can see the series that Jared and I did. It was called Union University. And we did a combination of setups, cueing. Jared also took me through some
Just like
corrective movements and mobility drills that would help anybody. So, yeah, go back to those. But what we're going to talk about today is kind of going to go with that, kind of hand in hand, tandem style.
Yeah. Gangnam Style?
Oh, man, that's a throwback. What do you think he's up to? Dropping hits?
For sure.
Still?
Still on the radio, definitely.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with the squat. Okay? Now, I'll talk about how I will set somebody up for a squat, and you tell me if yours is different or similar. Deal?
All right. Yeah.
All right. So, regardless, when you start a movement for your setup, it either has to be your checklist from the floor up or from the top down, from your head down. I like from the floor up, just because I think the start of the foundation of the movement is from the floor, right? That's what we're connected to. But some people, for them, it just works better to get their head in the right position and then go down the chain. But it's individualized. Okay, so start from the floor up for me. So I'm going to start with the feet. Sometimes you'll see me even lifting without any shoes on, and that's usually in the off season because I'm addressing maybe some weak areas. Maybe I realized that I had some shifting going on, or I wasn't connected to the floor and something just didn't feel right. So taking my shoes off, trimming my toenails, by the way, making sure they're not crazy looking. Don't worry about that.
That's how you grip the floor.
The toenails?
Yeah.
Yeah, like werewolf style.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll remember that. Put 100 pounds on my squat, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm rooting the floor. I'm thinking about taking my toes, spreading them. This is very important, especially in today's world, because people were wearing like really tight shoes, right? We always have shoes on whenever in our bare feet. So our toes are all like crunched up looking, bunions everywhere. And there's actually crazy pictures on the internet of like the evolution of somebody's feet from wearing like a toed shoe all day. But we're not going to get into that. So what we want to do, whether we have shoes on or not, we want to think about opening our toes and kind of digging into the floor. That's going to build that arch in our feet. That's going to start the whole foundation. So building that arch in the feet, grabbing the floor, and then what we're going to do is twist, externally rotate the hip, right? So twisting into the floor, what we call rooting. Now, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where we start. I skip the knees because if your feet are set right and your hips are externally rotated correctly, your knees are just in between.
Yeah, for the purpose of a squat, you're just hinging it. Your knees is a hinge joint, so
Correct.
You don't need to do anything. Just
Correct.
don't unlock them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you're glued to the floor, your hips are set right, the knees are where they got to be. All right. Then next, we're gonna go what I call sternum. Some people say chest, but for me, sternum should never be set up facing towards the floor. All right. So we never want to be have our letters facing towards the floor. At the same time, we don't want to overemphasize that and have that sternum pointed straight up towards the ceiling. That's no good either. But we want to have that sternum facing up, facing right out in front of us. Now, what comes along with that? They go hand in hand, our back position. So we're going to set our back. We want to make sure that we're not up into our traps, up into our neck. All right. We're going to have those lats and those shoulder blades depressed, like they're going down into our back pockets. And if we do that, the chest kind of follows. Same thing, if we do the chest, most of the time the shoulder blades and the lats kind of follow. Then last thing is our head position. I'm not a fan of looking down. It works for some people. Even works for you to an extent. But I found that for me personally, when I would look down, a lot of other things would follow. And I think especially when you unrack and you go to walk the bar out, we don't want to have to rely on where we're putting our feet because it can throw us off balance a little bit. So getting our head in a good position, getting it in that neutral position, and making sure that it's not kind of hung out away from our body. Because again, everything wants to follow kind of what our head tends to do. At the same time, if we're looking straight up towards the ceiling, remember when you were like growing up?
Everybody said, "Look up."
Everybody said, "Look up." I
Look up.
remember in high school, all the football coaches who were like the strength coaches, they had people looking straight
like
up towards the
craning your
ceiling,
neck up,
right?
yeah,
And what was happening? Their hips were shooting up, their chest was falling down,
arching your back,
but your head, your eyes are looking straight up, but everything else is falling forward,
going down.
So that, there's not really a direct correlation between those two things. So that's why it's important, I think, a good neutral head position, whatever that means for you and your style of squatting.
Yeah, I think one of the things to just better clarify between the lats and the traps before we move on just a little bit, you see people kind of take that breath and you see them shrug and then feel like they set the weight. They're not really, most people aren't setting their lats. Keep in mind, like, your lats attach your shoulder blades to your spine, to your hips, right? They're a very large muscle group. So to be able to appropriately like set and brace your lats for a lift, you're going to set everything around your spine there, your shoulder blades, your spine, and your hips, and make it very stable before you start moving. So just to kind of keep the importance of getting your lats set in general.
Yeah, everything has to be set before you take that breath, right?
Yeah.
Or it's not going to get set. It's not going to be stable after that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like when I work with patients who a lot of them have generally never learned how to lift anything. They've just always picked stuff up, moved it around, like just kind of gone through it as they will. When I'm teaching them how to lift something, I break it down even a lot simpler than that, right? Like I have them get close to the load, whatever. Like I usually have them lift it's like a wooden box that has some handles on it, right? So we get close to it. I have them keep it close to their body. And by keeping it close, I have them kind of pull it into themselves. It sets their lats,
Perfect.
right?
Yep.
I have them take a deep breath. And then all I do is I tell them to get down to the weight, you want to shut a car door with your butt, right? So they're going to hinge at the hip, shut a car door with their butt. They grab it. And then to stand up, I just tell them to push the floor away.
Yes. Yes.
And then they'll just like shoot up faster, and they look at me in surprise every time. They're like,
Right.
"Whoa!"
Because they've never moved. They've never picked anything up like
Mhm.
that, right? Or
Yeah, and
never
then they're like,
lifted anything.
"Oh, it didn't hurt," and I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah. Science, crazy.
hmm
No, but the same thing applies, right? When you, the only difference is with a squat, with a heavy loaded barbell squat, you have something on your back trying to
yeah,
push you through the earth,
hmm
right? So you can't only think about driving through the floor because now you have that barbell to think about as well.
yeah,
So that's where, like we were talking a little bit when we first started lifting, I know the only thing on my mind was just trying to stand up.
yep,
I make sure that bar is in a good position, and I only thought about squeezing my shoulder blades together because that's what you're taught. Build a shelf. And when you're 150 pounds,
What are you saying?
you, when I was 150, your 150 was different than my 150. Okay. When I was 150 pounds, I didn't have structure back there. There was nowhere for the bar to really lock in place. So I had to squeeze my shoulder blades, right? So now I have a stable shelf, but I still have no control over that bar. So you're just holding on to it and making sure it doesn't fall off your back, but you don't have any rigidity or connection down to your waist that way. And that's where, like we talked about, the lats have to tie in.
Yeah.
So that's where, yes, it's good making a shelf, but if you can't put that downward pressure to where you're flexing those lats and making them nice and rigid, and keep in mind, they run all the way down to your obliques to your waist. So it ties everything together.
I can't think of more than like 2 cues when I squat. Otherwise, I get like all crazy in my head and I really mess up. Right.
But I think that's good.
Mhm.
I think, now I'm going to let you get into those, but keep in mind, like when you are squatting a heavy weight, you don't want to have more than 1 or 2 things on your mind.
Yeah.
Because that's just enough to paralyze you if you think too much.
Yeah.
So pick 1 to 2 cues, either like each week, over the course of a training block, and work on those. So go. What are yours?
Yeah. So right now, when I get under the bar, I take a couple deep like breaths to really expand and brace my core. And when I feel like I got it, I hit my brace and I set my lats, and that's when I unrack the bar. So I'm holding
Mhm.
that already, right?
Mhm.
I take 2 steps. I take 1 step back and then I match my foot. So it's as efficient as possible to unrack the weight.
Wait, what? You mean you don't want to take like 6 or 7?
I used to.
I think everybody did at one point, right?
Yeah. You're like shifting back and forth and
Exactly. And that's why it's important to take, a couple steps. When you first start lifting, maybe you're, messing with very submaximal weight, and you can walk all around to get yourself set and figure out where you want to be. But as you get advanced, you want to shorten that because you got to stabilize yourself when you have a lot of weight on your
yeah.
back,
I
right?
mean, a lot of like relatively whatever you squat,
Yes.
you want to make it as efficient as possible. So you don't need to take 5 steps out of the rack to get out of the rack. Like
Right.
you just unrack it, take 1 step, take your 2nd step to get whatever your stance is. If you need a tiny 3rd step,
Yep.
fine, but try not to do more than that.
I agree.
Keep it
Yep.
as efficient as possible.
Yep.
From there, that's where I just go feet. My feet are rooted.
Mm-hmm.
I get my lats and my core set again. And when I root my feet, my hips kind of follow. So I
Mhm.
don't really think about that one at all,
Yep.
me personally. So it's just core, lats, and then I start. And when I start my lift, I just think about kind of trying to open up a little bit, sit back into my hips, and then I try to just keep my lats as tight as I can going down
Mhm.
because I got long legs.
Mhm.
And what tends to happen with me, I got
Heard.
long legs and a big butt. So what
Hey,
happens to me is when
now.
I come up, I tend to do a stripper squat if I'm not thinking about it, right?
Mhm.
I'm really good at good mornings. So if I think about it and I keep it tight, I can have a real strong drive out of the hole and I don't dump forward. If I don't keep my lats tight as I go down, then my butt shoots up. People start throwing dollar bills at me. I miss the lift, but I make some money.
Believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Holler. Well, so what you're telling me is when lifting's over, there's life after powerlifting.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You don't build this butt for nothing.
So I'm pretty similar with you. Like for me, something that gets added to the equation is when I'm in knee wraps.
Okay. I've never done reps, so
Okay. Well, when you're ready, you let me know. We'll get you ready.
I'm not trying to cry in front of my friends.
So knee wraps shouldn't change the way you squat, but you do want to think about using them when you have them on. Because the first time I ever used knee wraps, I almost flew forward right? Because they're extending your
They
knee.
just shot your knees back.
Yeah. They're extending your knee harder than you would without knee wraps. So if you're not prepared up top and you're not thinking about driving your hips, wedging your hips as you're standing up, you're going to go forward. That happened to me a couple times.
Mhm.
It takes a little bit. So I'm very similar to you. I start with rooting, and I know that if I do that correctly, then my hips are good to go. All right. So right before I squat, I have that bar pulled into my back. I'm rooting through the floor. I take my breath and I think about filling my obliques. All right. Because sometimes if we think about pushing into our belt, we're just making ourselves fat, right? We're just pushing out to the front.
Yeah, you're just pushing your belly out.
Right. That's not bracing.
Nope.
So we want to think about filling the obliques, pushing out to the sides. And if we do that, the other stuff kind of falls into place. So as I'm going down in the squat, I'm thinking about screwing myself into the floor like if you were to put a screw in the floor, right? So I'm screwing myself into the floor, and what that's doing, it's loading up my hips and it's loading up the wraps. I'm not driving my knees out. If I think about driving my knees out, I'm going to roll on the outside of my feet, and then when I go to come up from the squat, my knees are going to cave in. So don't think about knees out as a cue. That's something I've learned over the years. Think about rooting into the floor, twisting, screwing into the floor as you're going down. Pushing into the belt is a big one for me, because if I don't focus on not just bracing, but as I'm going down, actively pushing that tension out, you're building pressure. And it doesn't sound fun, and sometimes it doesn't feel fun, but you're building pressure as you're getting down to the most vulnerable position of the squat, which is the bottom. And then I'm thinking about actively bringing that bar into my back. Now from there, the last thing I think about when I'm coming up out of the hole, I'm thinking about driving my head back into my neck and almost driving back into that bar. And what that does is it allows me to keep my hips close, keep that bar in line with the center of my body. And that way I don't get forward and my head doesn't get forward out away from me. If we can keep that tension down through our back and drive our head back into that bar as we come up out of the squat, we're going to finish in the same position that we started.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing too, if you're having trouble with like learning how to brace, one trick that I actually picked up from you, I like, is you tie the band around your belly, right? And you breathe into just like a light little band, and it squeezes all around you, so it kind of cues you to kind of breathe through your whole torso.
Mm-hmm.
I actually use it with patients a lot.
Awesome.
When I'm trying to teach them how to breathe when they have like back pain and stuff. It's actually really helpful. Most of them can start doing like sit to stands from chairs and
Nice.
light squats and deadlifts or whatever without as much pain. So I actually really like that one, but it's a good one. I actually saw some of the pit powerlifters doing it too.
Dude,
in
that
here.
was pretty cool. We went over that in the seminar, and as soon as we started, that was like the first thing. I started like handing them red bands.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, all right, put this around your waist where you would put your belt. And it was crazy that a lot of people didn't know where to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And that just kind of shows like, you're supposed to have a belt when you lift heavy, but A, where do you put it?
Yep.
And B, how do you use it?
Yeah.
And I think that band kind of teaches you both of those things. So that was a pretty cool one. So when you were a young lad, a young Jared, what did you think about when you squatted?
I would get really angry, and I would dive bomb down as far as I could, and then just try to stand up as fast as I could. And that's all I thought about. Honestly, like when I first started squatting, I would just get as aggressive as possible and drop as fast as I can, and then try to stand up as fast as I could. And then the weight like hits you like a ton of bricks, and then you just like grind through it. Your knees are wobbling, and you're forward, and all your coaches are yelling, "Look up, look up, look up!"
Yeah.
And you're just dying.
Up.
Yeah. Luckily though, my dad, we've talked about him. He was a powerlifter, so he helped me like when I first started squatting after he saw how horrendous it was. Yeah. So he used to tell me like spread the floor, like push the floor apart with my feet. And that's where I first got the cue of like to keep my knees out, right? So that helped with all that knee caving and stuff. So that was like the first big cue I got. And then he always told me to kind of pull my shoulder blades back and like really tighten them up. And that helped me a lot too. I didn't dump the weight forward as bad.
No, and I mean, like, I think everybody needs to experience that moment when they first start lifting. It's like life or death. It's like, okay, I have to go down fast and stand up fast or I'm going to die.
There was no eccentric to my squats when I first started. It was like the weight came off and I would just take a deep breath and hold it. Like I'd breathe up into my chest as high as I could. And then I would just dive bomb, and then it was like catching the weight to stand back up. Like
Yeah.
that, it was the stupidest. I don't know how I never got hurt.
We're gonna go back and scrounge up some old videos one day, and we're just gonna like show everybody our
Oh,
old
like on the
lifting
old
videos.
flip phone videos. Yeah.
Right. All right, so that's our squat. So again, I think like it's kind of universal. Now, like your actual verbal cues, they can be different,
Mhm.
but the end result, we kind of want it to be the same. You know. So
So just pick two
yeah. Pick.
and work on them, and when they're
Yeah.
good, pick another one or two if
Yep.
you need to.
Yep. I think that's perfect. Each week, each training block, whatever you're doing.
I give it a full training block
Yeah.
just to nail it down.
Yep. If you're working with clients or patients, give it a few weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I don't discharge somebody until they either like don't have pain for a full week, or they're not like they can do everything well for like a full week. They can
Mhm.
show it to me, because that means that that shows me that they can be independent with it, right?
Sure.
So like I think that's a good way to carry through, is if you can go through. You're not like, I see a lot of people 3 times a week, right? So they're showing me 3 times in a row. You probably train the squat 4 times a month or whatever. So if you can do it, 4 or 5 times in a row, so like in a full month,
Yep.
then I'd say, you're good. Try to move on to something else if you need to.
I would agree. And this is no different whether somebody is working with you or you are recording yourself, watching yourself. It
Mhm.
it doesn't really matter. Just know that this is to let you know that when you're recording yourself, what are the things you're looking at, and when you're analyzing a video, either top down or bottom up. Look at them in those steps.
All
So
right, on to the bench press.
onto the bench, Jared's favorite,
Ugh.
my least favorite.
Blech. Nobody likes bench press.
So tell me about your setup. Tell me about your setup for the bench.
So how I do it now, is taking a lot of trial and error. So I arch really hard when I bench. I wouldn't say I have a big arch, but I arch pretty hard. So when I go to set up on a bench, the first thing I do is I get my eyes underneath the bar, like my feet are up on the bench at this point, and I try to arch through my thoracic spine as much as possible. And at the same time I'm doing that, my hands are on the bar. I'm retracting and depressing my shoulder blades. Once I feel that I'm so tight that I'm almost shaking, I take a breath, I get my feet set, and I get pressure into the floor with my quads, right? At that point, I feel like I can't move anywhere and I'm ready to explode. I get my hand off. That's all I think about.
Okay.
Right?
So let me just go over that real quick. So you'll lay on the bench.
Mhm.
You'll put your feet flat up on the bench.
I'm on my toes because I'm really pushing up into my shoulders. But yeah, feet
But
are up on the bench.
before that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're laying on the bench. You got your grip.
Mhm.
Then you push yourself up, and your hips are up off the bench.
Yep.
And you're setting yourself high up on your upper back and your traps.
Yep.
All right. So once you have that, you driving those shoulder blades down into your back pockets and pulling them together,
Mhm.
locking everything in, and then you're one at a time. You get your feet set on the floor. Correct.
I take a breath first. I like really make sure I don't want to get into my arch without a brace, because then I lose
Gotcha.
my arch. Like if I set my feet down, I'll like sink down a little bit. I lose it. So I always have a brace before I set my feet down into my arch.
Okay. Perfect. So you got those feet set. You're already braced. Your upper back is arched, thoracic, not lumbar.
If you're having back pain when you're arching, it's probably because you're extending your lumbar spine more than your thoracic spine.
Yep. So we're setting our upper back. Then Jared's ready to go. His feet are on the ground.
Got pressure
Right.
through my feet. Yep.
So that's kind of the opposite of what I used to do. I would set my feet and then work my way up. So when I would sit down on the bench, sitting upright, just like I'm
Mhm.
sitting in this chair, I would know exactly where my feet need to go on each side. Because at the time I was benching flat feet.
Mm-hmm.
So I put my feet flat exactly where they need to be. Then as I lay back under the bar, I'm keeping them there. I'm making sure they don't move. So I'm laying completely flat, no arch at this point, completely relaxed. I get my grip, and then what I do is I kind of bridge myself up and pull myself up under the bar
Mm-hmm.
and set myself high up on my back. So it's just kind of the opposite of what you did. So I'm bridging myself up, setting myself, and then I'm pushing myself back into the bench, and I'm setting my shoulder blades and lats that way as I'm driving through the floor.
Mm-hmm.
From there, what I'm doing is I'm squeezing the bar, and I'm thinking about breaking that bar. That's always a cue for me. I'm
Yep.
thinking about bending that bar and breaking it, and then kind of pulling outward on it as well. From there, I'm going to take my breath, big breath into my midsection, and then I'm going to push myself down into the bench to unrack the bar. I'm not thinking about pressing the bar out of the rack.
Yep.
I'm thinking about driving myself down into the bench in order to unrack. And what that does, it makes sure my legs are on, right? My leg drive is instantly on, my butt's tight, but my back is set and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, should be solid as a rock.
And if you want to set everything the way you want it before you unrack the bar, not wait until that bar is on its way down to try to get tight. And then from there, you're thinking about just continuing to bend that bar, push back into the bench, thinking about meeting everything in the middle, coiling yourself up and just blowing it
chest
up.
meets the bar.
Yeah.
I think one thing people don't do a lot of, and I'm glad you brought this up, is they don't like squeeze the bar. Like,
Sure.
The harder you squeeze that bar, you're gonna have more like neural drive. Like your brain is ready to handle more weight.
Mhm.
The harder you squeeze that bar. If it's just kind of relaxed in your hands, you're not gonna have the same pressing power as if you like really are gripping that bar hard.
Mhm.
So grip that bar, kind of try to twist and break it apart, and even pulling out a little bit, like you said. I
Yeah.
use all those cues too.
Yeah. I think, from what I've learned for myself, the breaking the bar, the bending the bar,
Mhm.
that's really going to engage the lats and it's going to set us into a good external rotation, get our elbows where they need to be. And the pulling apart is going to engage our upper back muscles.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, we want to keep that on the whole time. One cue, this has kind of like been a groundbreaking cue for me. And I was always told this and I could never feel it, is to drive yourself down into the bench. Like, what does that mean? How am I going to drive myself down into a bench in order to lift this weight? I need to press this weight off of me. Well, yes, you do. But what you do is as that bar is coming down, you're loading up your legs. They should be tight. And then when you go to press, push yourself away from the bar. Push yourself down through that pad and think about pushing the bench across the room behind you. If you think about pushing that bench across the room and pushing yourself down to the bench, that bar is almost, it's going to load your lats up. That bar is almost going to just jump off of your chest. And then you want to make sure that you're tucking that chin at the same time. So you look ugly as hell. When you do it, you got 18 chins. And then hopefully you drive that bar all the way through lockout.
Yeah.
That's been the one that's been clicking for me.
Let's talk more about head position, because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, because it's so important in deadlift and squat what you're doing with your head. And bench, I feel like a lot of people are just like loosey goosey.
Mhm.
Some people like to peek
Yeah.
and go see where the bars go, and some people just stare at the roof and pray to God. That's me. So talk a little bit more about head position.
So I think it varies on the individual. What I see done very often that I don't think is good is people will bring their head up off the bench as the bar
As
is
the
coming
bar comes
down.
down, yeah.
But here's the thing. I've seen some people get away with it and it actually works to their advantage. And I still don't know how. But most people, when they pull their head up off the bench as the bar is coming down, their back gets flat. So everything that they built while they're setting up and while they unrack that bar, as that bar is coming down, they peek, they follow where the bars go, and they look at their chest. Their shoulders start to round forward. They have internal shoulder rotation. Their back flattens out. And that's just a bad spot to be in. Now, if you're a very large, powerful person,
Like me.
like Jared, not like me, not like Josh, you can press out of that because you have so much mass and you can use it to your advantage to almost throw that weight off of you. But for most people, that looking up is going to put you in a bad spot.
Yeah, I would never ever recommend to anyone starting bench to have your head come off the bench at all.
Yep.
While you're pressing, right? So if you're my size, for example, and your head comes off the bench immediately, so if I like look down or I like pick my head up off the bench, my thoracic spine is going to slightly flex. That takes me out of some of the extension I have. If that flexes, my shoulder blades are going to tip forward. That gets my lats out of it. I'll just lost everything I just tried to set up.
Yep.
All because I want to look at the bar on my chest.
Right. And you're talking about now you just added like 2 to 3 inches to your
Mhm.
range of motion because you're chasing your chest. You're
Yeah.
trying to catch your chest that's going away from you.
Yep.
So you have to bring the bar down even further.
So one cue that I heard of that kind of helped get people out of this. Some people like to watch the bar as it comes down and goes up. I'd say probably most people like to watch the
Mhm.
bar as it goes. If someone is watching the bar as it's coming down, a lot of times they're gonna pick up their head, right? So I went to this seminar with the guy's, his name's Mike. He's through what's it called, Barbell Rehab, I believe.
Okay.
the cue that he gives people is to just find a point on the ceiling and just stare at that. Don't follow the bar at all, and it works really well to give to like new lifters, advanced lifters, doesn't matter, but it helps you stay in that position, and you're fixated on one point. It's not going to change your pressing pattern, and you're going to be able to stay in position better.
No, I agree, and I think one thing that you see a lot of with newer bench pressers is when the weight gets hard, when they get in that sticking point, you notice everybody starts looking to one side or the other, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, where's the rack? I got to rack this thing, dear God.
Or they're uneven and they're like, oh no, is it going to fall?
Right. Well, which one comes first, the chicken or the egg? And from what I've seen is that as you're pressing, if you start looking out to your left, that you're going to start driving more with your opposite side. And that's going to put you in a bad position. And that's where you develop a lot of bad habits that way. So I think to look at the ceiling cue is great.
It's great until you have a spotter who really likes to get up over you.
Oh yeah. And then you're just like,
you're either making eye contact or dingling contact.
We are one.
That goes back to what CJ and I do, and we train with our significant others.
Nice.
Heard.
Perfect.
You will never see me train with my significant other in here. I love her, but when she comes in, hey, you're over there, I'm over here. We just drive each other crazy.
Yeah, that's fair.
But anyway, so yeah, look at the ceiling, keep it fixed. Now, another thing is don't let your head go real far back. So you don't want your chin facing up towards the ceiling because that's going to lose that upper back tightness as well. So in each direction, it can be, a disadvantage, just like the squat and just like the deadlift when we get there.
You can use the same cues for the bench, like just packing your neck works.
Yes.
And just keep your head on the bench, pack your neck, don't worry about it.
Yep. Drive your head and your upper back down into the bench has been one of the biggest things for me. Yeah. So the eyes and the head are a big one. No doubt. Now, what did you think about when you were, again, a young Jared? How'd you bench press? Were you a bouncer? NFL combine?
Oh, dude. Yeah. Come on now. Yeah. That's how I got my first 6 inches of range of motion.
Yeah.
Just bounce it off my chest and try to catch it.
Yeah.
It's the same way I squatted. You just down and up as fast as you can. Butt lift was all there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I was kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
I read all the bodybuilding magazines when I first got into lifting. So I was like elbows out, back flat, big stretch in the pecs, and I would never touch my chest. I was like 3-4 inches off my chest all the time. One of the old football coaches who gave me shit for being in the weight room, he was like, "Hey Miller, you doing partial reps?" And I thought he was just shitting on me. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, "No, I'm being serious. Are you doing like half reps?" And I was like, "Okay, whatever." I didn't know what he was talking about. I thought that was the only way you bench press, So it's funny, but I just always used to think about trying to get the weight off of me.
Yeah.
I never knew,
I remember the first time I paused with a bench press, and I think it took 40 pounds off my bench because I would just bounce so hard, right? And then I can't remember when it was, but my dad, I remember him being like, "We're gonna try pausing on your chest. It's better for you. That's what you do when you compete."
That's what men do.
I was like, "All right." So I go down, and it just stuck, and he had to lift it off of me. I couldn't budge it.
He was just teaching you a lesson.
Probably.
That had nothing to do with trying to teach you.
I just remember being in high school and I thought I was so tough because I could rep out, 2 plates.
Yeah.
And then I just remember, I think I put, I don't remember what it was, 250 on or something. I could bounce it off my chest and get it. And then he was like, no, pause it. Stuck. He's like, press it.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm done.
Ain't happening,
I'm done.
dog. Ain't happening. Come a long way, Jared. So,
Thanks, man.
So let's go deadlift, homie.
Let's go deadlift.
All right. I think there's no secret. This is probably our best lifts.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You know what I mean? Now, were you just a natural deadlifter or did you kind of get some guidance?
So I've always actually been good at deadlifting. Even when my form was trash, I was always able to pick up a decent amount of weight. Like my first powerlifting meet I ever did, I deadlifted 500 pounds and I didn't train for it. So that was, and I had kind of a wide stance. I pulled conventional. My hands were outside my legs. It was like a partial snatch grip.
Oh, you're like strongman style.
It was, it was strange looking. I didn't
Brian
know what to do. Yeah, I was watching videos just to all the strongest deadlifters are these huge dudes. So I took a wider stance and my hands were outside my legs and I just picked it up. Yeah. That's all it was. So I don't know. I've always been good at it, but I've added probably 150 pounds to my deadlift since I've been training with my coach. Shout out Rob Polenic.
Nice.
So yeah, a lot has changed since the beginning.
Yeah,
No more
for
grip
sure.
it and rip it.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, when I first started lifting, when I walked into the weight room at the high school, and I was graduated high school, by the way, but when I first walked in the weight room, no, I'm just saying, like, most people start lifting pretty early.
I
I was
graduated high school, by the way. Humble brag.
I had a
Congrats.
I had an '87 Trans Am with T tops like Billy Madison.
It's like there was an athlete that said that he was like ragging on his son, and he's like I played basketball, I played football, and maintained a 2.8 GPA, and everyone's like,
That's amazing.
Wow, dude. Straight.
Wait,
But all right, so you
That's
got your
bad?
diploma. Where are we now?
Yeah, right.
I was 30 years old, walked back into high school, and no, I was so I was very scared. You know, I mean, I was intimidated by everybody in there that was bench pressing, throwing. Like 225, 275. That was a lot of weight for me to fathom at the time. So I went over in the corner, and I didn't know how to pick up a straight bar, but there was a trap bar, and I would just set the trap bar up all by myself. And each week I would do like sets of 8 to 10. I was doing 8 to 10 reps every time I load the trap bar up. Never did anything super heavy. And for probably like a year, that's pretty much all I did. And then, of course, you know, I'm messing with machines and curls and stuff like that. So I think without even realizing it, I was building the foundation for a strong deadlift. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then finally, people started coming over talking to me like, dude, your deadlift looks pretty good. I'm like, dude, teach me how to bench press. And we're like, let's
Switch, yeah.
set up a barter system here. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of how I got into bench pressing, into squatting. But my first powerlifting meet I ever did, I deadlifted 560, and it didn't look good. You know what I mean? Like I bent down, I grabbed the bar, I tried to get in a good position, but I just had established that foundation of good strength, and I was just able to lift the weight.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, over the years, it's just evolved into, okay, I have this strength, but I can't just continue to get stronger. You know, like we can
Yeah.
only get so strong before we have to really start realizing, like, okay, how are we moving? How can I be more efficient with this?
Mm-hmm.
Just like your patients that you're working with,
Yep.
right? Everybody has a certain level of strength already established. How do we take what we have and be efficient and move properly to last a long time? In our case, we want to last lifting as long as we can.
Yeah.
So when you're deadlifting 500, 600, 700 pounds every
Thanks,
single
man.
week,
700 pounds. I appreciate it.
yeah, 800, yeah.
One day.
When you're lifting that week after week, you have to be efficient with it. If
Yeah.
not, like you're knocking on the door of being done with powerlifting. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So
For sure.
we kind of got off track there.
A
But,
little bit.
but
So we'll reel it back in. So cues for the deadlift. Should we break it down into conventional and sumo because they're a little different?
they're a little different. They're a little similar too.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll touch on both of them. So let's start with conventional because in my opinion, I think everybody should learn how to conventional deadlift.
I agree.
I think what we're seeing right now is because if you can learn how to sumo deadlift somewhat decent, you know, you can be pretty strong at it. But then people, they go to try to conventional deadlift and like
Don't know
they
what they're
can't.
doing. Yeah.
You know, they don't know what to do. So I think everybody should know how to do both very proficiently. With the conventional deadlift, it's very similar to a squat. Your setup is very similar. Your width is different with your feet. Most people with conventional deadlift are going to be right around shoulder width apart or a little closer. Good rule of thumb is like if you're doing a vertical jump, what's your vertical jump stance? Another one is if you hang from a pull-up bar completely relaxed, then let go. Where you land, where your feet are, that's roughly where you want your stance to be. Now, you're still grabbing the floor, rooting, externally rotating at the hip. That's very important, just like a squat. And then one thing I see where people go wrong a lot is they just like fold over when they go to grab the bar.
Mm-hmm.
The more rounded over and the more of a shitty position you're in when you grab that bar, you're now connected from the floor to the bar. It's going to be that much harder to get out of that position into a good position. It's like a squat setup. If I set up for the squat and my sternum is facing towards the ground and I got that bar up on my shoulders and I'm hunched over, I don't care how strong you are, you ain't getting out of that position. It's set. That bar has locked you in position. Same thing when you grab that bar. Grab the bar similar to the same position that you want to be in when you go to pull it. Now, I'm not saying squat down in your deadlift position. I'm saying almost think about doing a RDL down to the bar, Romanian deadlift. Push your hips back, keep your back flat, grab the bar with both your hands at the same time, not one and then the other. Both hands at the same time, lock your lats in, and then use the tension of the bar, pull that slack out, and then use it to pull yourself down into position. That's going to load up your hips. It's going to feel like you're about to jump right through the floor, and it's going to keep those lats locked in. From there, the last thing is your head position. Neutral head position, not up, not down.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think a couple things that people are afraid to do. One, you want to have a slight knee forward when you conventional deadlift because you get a small quad drive off the floor. That gives you a huge advantage when you're pulling big weight, right? Because it allows you to accelerate. So you get that, the slack out of the bar, you're ready to go. Your quads should be loaded. So when you get that first pop off the floor, your hips and your shoulders rise at the same time, and then you can just get your hips through, right? I think a lot of people are too worried about having a vertical shin, and that actually does not put you in an advantageous position at all, because then you got to do a full hinge to get out of it, and it's just not as efficient. Talking about efficiency. So I'd say that's like one of the biggest things I see with people is they're so worried about having a vertical shin when you actually shouldn't. You should have a slightly forward knee before you start a conventional deadlift.
Completely agree. And it does depend on the leverages of the individual.
Yeah.
But nobody wants a perfectly vertical shin.
Nope.
Unless we're talking about sumo. Now, in my opinion, sumo, you want a relatively vertical shin. But one cue for both of these before we jump into sumo, I was actually talking to one of my friends last night about his deadlift. Most people, when they think about deadlifting, they think about picking the weight up, right? I'm pulling the bar. That's not what you want to think, because that's going to get you in a really cruddy position through your upper back, and it's going to cause your hips to shoot back, and it's going to put all the stress on your lower back. What you want to do is think about separating your body in half. So right as you go to lift, you're thinking about driving through the floor like a leg press, like you're pushing yourself through the floor, and you're trying to take the top of your head through the ceiling. So you're thinking about your body going in opposite directions. And what that usually does is that allows those hips to come through and wedge. And that's what continues to drive. If you're taking your head up and your feet down through the floor, bringing your hips forward, physics, it's crazy.
Yeah. If you have a problem with rounding of your back too, right? So I think that's another big one. Like people try to go to do that big drive off the floor like you talked about, and they immediately just round their back as hard as they can, and then they look like a scared cat. And what happens is, you look like a scared cat and you're real strong and you can pull it up and then you can't lock it out. You're right at that end point. Well, what happened is all the stress is now in smaller muscles through like your erectors, and your erectors aren't going to be as strong as your glutes to finish the lift, right? So as we talked about with the squat and the bench, set your lats. If you can set your lats at the beginning and brace your core, that your back's really not going to go too far. And a tiny bit of rounding, especially for an experienced lifter, is fine because it engages your erectors. That's good, but an excessive amount, you're not going to finish the lift well.
Right, I agree.
You're gonna get stuck.
And I think one thing that people think too much about is instant speed off the floor. But a lot of times, if your only focus is speed, then you're going to compromise position as that bar starts to leave the floor. And I know me, I would rather have an easier lockout and less speed off the floor than a bunch of speed off the floor and a hard lockout.
And a grinder for a lockout, yeah.
But I'll be honest, I always thought it was the opposite when I first started lifting, because the guys that I was watching,
that's what they did.
It was speed. It was be as brutally fast and powerful as possible. And yes, you want to be that way when you lift, but it has to be controlled and tamed, or else you're gonna end up in a really bad spot.
So one thing I like to tell people in that case, right, is you're getting the slack out of the bar, you're building all the pressure that you can to get yourself into position, right? You're getting the slack out, you're keeping your tension, and you'll feel that point where the bar is about to like break the floor. That's where you can have your speed. So you're like, my coach describes it as like 20%, 40%, 80%, and then go, right? It's like slowly building that percentage bar until you're at max capacity, and then you can just blow it off the floor. Doing that, I've noticed even on like higher percentage attempts for me on the deadlift, I'll have so much more speed to finish my lift than if I try to pop it off the floor.
Right.
Like so much more speed finishing my deadlift.
And one thing that I use to describe that is patience.
Mm-hmm.
Not patience is in pull slow. Patience is in take a couple extra seconds to build that tension, get into position a little bit harder to where you give that bar time to feel light, and then you know, boom, it's time to go.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to learn, and it's very uncomfortable. So
Yes.
like when you're conventional or sumo, you're getting yourself into that bar, you're taking the slack out, like it doesn't feel good, and it'll feel really, really heavy as
Mhm.
you're doing it because you're starting to pick up some of that weight. But if you can stick with it and get to that point and then hit your drive, it'll go.
And I think when you're first starting out, take your time and be a little bit more patient on your setup. So don't just get into position and then pull, because you're not going to understand how to build tension and what tension is. That's something that I was always like a fast lifter.
Mm-hmm.
I would get tight, and then as soon as I would get in position, I would try to go to
Amen, brother. Amen.
take that momentum. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
But
Yee!
now, as a more advanced lifter, I've had to take a step back
Yeah.
and reestablish that tension and that patience to continue to go. So I think as you progress, start slow with your setup, start with more patience, getting into position, build that tension. And then as you get used to it,
Yep.
you can decrease the amount of time that you're down into that position, because you can feel it sooner, because you know what that tension feels like.
Yes, definitely.
But never rush. Never rush.
Just don't rush your deadlift.
You're gonna want to, because you're like, this is heavy.
Yeah.
I need to pick this up.
Yep.
But at first, when you learn what patience is, it's gonna feel worse. But then after a few weeks, after a few months, it's gonna start moving much more effortlessly.
Yep, I agree. So on to sumo.
Okay.
Um,
Start it up. Start up, King Sumo.
Kings, yeah, right. So when I set up for a sumo, I think a lot of people are really worried about how wide they stand.
Too worried.
So when I like to set up in my sumo deadlift, everybody's limited by how much external rotation in your hips you have. So I take a stance, and you practice this with like a kettlebell or something, as wide as I can, where my knees can still track with my toes. So your toes are pointed out a little bit.
How far out?
I don't really. Everybody's a little different on
Yep.
that. Some people are super forward. Some people are really turned out. Just
Yeah.
kind of depends on your anatomy and your mobility.
The only thing I'll add is that if your feet are turned out too far, you're not gonna have any balance when you're pulling.
No, yeah, you
You're
don't
gonna-
want
you're
like
gonna fall forward or fall backwards.
yeah, unless
so-
you're Wyatt.
Yeah, unless you're wide, right? But you don't want them straight ahead either, because then you're not going to be able to open up your hips without rolling onto your feet.
Some people actually get better glute tension with straight ahead.
Yes,
Um,
they do get better glute tension. I do think it limits how far out they're able to open up their
Mhm.
hips.
Yeah.
But it's that compromise. Everybody's different.
Yep. So you can angle your feet out, but as long as your knees can stay in line with like your middle two toes,
Yep.
that's where you want to be, right? When
Yep.
you're setting up. As we talked about, this is where you kind of want a vertical shin, right?
Mhm.
Because what happens is on a sumo pull, you aren't worried as much about like you're not squatting the weight off the floor, but you're not getting like as deep, I
Mhm.
guess,
Yep.
right? You're up a little higher, so you don't need as much of a forward shin angle because your quads are going to be involved off the floor immediately anyway. So you open your hips up to get as close to the bar as you can. I like to get my brace, right? And then I get down and I grab the bar. I hook grip, so I don't
Mhm.
worry about doing that whole, one hand and the other like some people like to do.
Hook grip, boys, for life.
Hook
For life. When I was learning hook grip, I used to drive around in my
Oh, and hook grip?
my '96 Toyota Camry like
That is
this.
wildly problematic
Uh,
of a hand gesture from you.
Ask my friends. They used to witness me driving like this.
So
Oh,
yeah, so you get your hips set and you go down to the bar, right? I like to grab the bar and I like to kind of get my lats set as
Mhm.
soon as I get to the bar, so I kind of get to feel where that tension is. From there, I take my inhale, I brace my core, and then what I do is I wedge into the bar. By that I mean I open my hips up and I pull the bar into me, like using my lats, right? And that gets all the slack out of the bar and it starts to clear the floor there. As I'm opening up and getting the tension, I'm driving the floor down with my quads,
Mhm.
right? That bar breaks the floor. That's when you pop.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Perfect. Yeah, that exact same thing. I think the thing that people need to know about sumo, and you already said this, it is uncomfortable when it's done correctly. it shouldn't feel good. Like, when I work with people on sumo, they're like, man, I felt like my hips were going to fly apart. Yeah, because you're building tension in your hips, right?
Mhm.
That's not a natural position to be in.
It's
And
hard.
when you get in position, you grab that bar and you're thinking that you're driving out, drive out harder. With sumo, always, whatever you're doing, do it a little bit more
Mhm.
when in doubt. Because most people, they'll get in position, they'll drive their knees out, they'll pull their chest up, but they're not quite there. And then you say, hold that, drive out harder. And you can see them opening up their hips a little bit more. And when they do that, their chest rises a little bit more, their hips get a little closer to the bar, that slack starts coming out of the bar, and then you say, go. And then they're like, holy crap.
It just pops.
It just pops.
Yeah.
You feel like a spring that just flies apart.
Mhm.
And that's when you're in a good sumo position, you're not really thinking about pushing through the floor like in conventional. Like, yes, you are pushing through the floor, but you're more so you're outward, you're upward, and you're inward all at the same time. And if you can do that, that bar is just going to move on its own.
Yep. Yeah.
And that, again, I think one of the things that goes hand in hand with everything else, your head position. So you want a neutral head position. You don't want to look up. Some great deadlifters have gotten away with that. That's for them. For a majority of people who are going to deadlift, your head needs to be in a neutral position, and you don't want it hanging out. You don't want to be
Yeah.
turtlenecking. You want everything packed in line or behind that
When
bar.
you pack it, it's gonna help you pull back into that bar a little bit. If
Yep.
you're forward, you're not gonna get that, and if you're looking up, you're not gonna get that because it's probably gonna compromise your low back.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So we're on the same page with that, no doubt. But I mean, I would say the one that I'm still working on the most is my bench.
Yeah.
It's the one thing I haven't got a handle on quite yet, but it's clicking a little bit. But it's crazy because still learning about the deadlift too.
Yeah.
I learned something about the damn deadlift last week, and it's like I thought I had this thing figured out.
Yep. That's where
You
I'm
know?
at too. I have to relearn some things on a deadlift now too.
Yeah.
Yep.
So so go into Union University.
I think we only have the squat videos up.
Do we? I thought we had bench.
I don't think so. We're gonna have to get on those.
Okay, we'll fire that back up. We're looking it up real quick. What do we got?
Yeah, I think it's just
Yeah,
squat.
we just did the squat.
Because I think that's like around COVID.
Oh,
and
that's when we
weren't able
closed
to-
down.
Yeah, we
No,
weren't
you're
able
exactly
to do
right.
it.
Okay, we'll fire that back up
Yes,
for
sir.
the people. Now, our the great and powerful Josh said he had something for us.
Oh boy.
All right. So
I'm scared.
We've been challenging our listeners since you guys started your version of the podcast to call in with questions or write in with questions, that kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
And we asked for some, like people looking for advice, people looking for help. So I'm going to set the example and see if we can't drive a couple of these people.
Oh, set it.
All right.
All
Set it.
right.
Set it.
So here's the deal. We went zip lining this past weekend, and I was like 5 pounds from being too heavy to go zip lining.
Okay.
So 250 was too heavy, and I was at 245.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? At a 5'8" frame, that is not effective.
Man, you're taller than 5'8".
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
He's got me by an inch.
Yeah.
Tiny. But so what I want to do is I am your blank canvas here. I can give you guys 3 days a week to do actual gym workouts, but I can give you closer to 4 to 5 in cardio.
Okay.
All right.
So I'm going to do some before pictures and do measurements and weight and all that kind of stuff for
Love it.
everybody.
Love
and
it.
we'll bring it in 2 weeks. So we'll start the Get Josh Shirtless summer.
Dude, I love it.
Let's go.
I love it.
Let's
in,
go.
in 2 weeks. All right.
So you bring up a couple really good points. You said you're going to take measurements and your weight.
yeah, I learned that on this show.
Holla. But yeah, because I've seen people like lose circumference, right, in different areas of their body. Their measurements go down and their weight stays the same or even
It
like goes up.
Yeah, because they're packing
Right.
on the muscle.
But that's hard for a lot of people to fathom. So
Mhm.
that's why, like Josh said, measurements and weight, see the correlation between the two, especially if you're going to be doing weight training. If you're going to be squatting, benching, deadlifting, using machines,
Mhm.
using dumbbells, kettlebells, bands, whatever, you're gonna build some muscle. You know what I mean? So you want to look at both of those, and as much as we don't want to, pictures go a long way.
Yeah.
The reason being, you look at yourself every single day. in my mind, I haven't changed in 10 years.
Yep.
I'm the same little Curtis that my mom loves.
Oh,
Right.
Kurt.
And then every time she sees me, she's like, "You just keep getting bigger." I'm like, "Nah, Mom, I'm still the same."
I'm
But
still Kurt.
yeah,
I'm your little Kurt.
but you don't realize it. You don't realize it when you look at yourself every day. So take those pictures, compare them. Don't be ashamed about them. You know what I mean? Like that's part of the journey.
So yeah, we're in it.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Just to give you guys a heads up, the second I even look at a bench press, my chest gets big, so that'll be the first thing that changes.
Cool.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't know
I don't
why.
I don't see the problem.
No, I know, right? Like I can do one bench workout, and then the next day, like I'm like, man, this shirt fits different.
Yeah.
Like,
They start like taking shirts off
Yeah,
and not
you
wearing
know.
shirts.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
all right.
I love it, dude. I love it. Let's
Cool.
fire it up.
Awesome.
Bring the people in. This is a time.
Yeah.
This is a time
This
to
is
do it,
it.
man. Like this is the
Shirtless summer.
yeah. Let's just get all of Pittsburgh walking around like that. No?
Shirtless summer.
Yeah.
Hashtag shirtless summer.
Yeah.
Let's see it in your Instagram
Yeah.
posts.
Yeah.
Josh Conroy, big fan of shirtless summer. I know it already.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll get everybody doing shirtless summer this
As long as
summer.
I don't get fired, I'm good.
Let's go.
Like, okay.
Hey,
All right.
shirtless summer doesn't need to be a dirty thing.
All right. All right, cool.
All right, we'll
So-
do crop top summer.
Yeah,
Yes.
let's do that. What's it? Josh Conroy told me last week. He was like, "Dude, can we get some Union crop tops?" I was like, "I'm in.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Squatting in our crop top,
Yup.
benching in it. Let's do it."
Raindrop.
So
Crop
that should have been our song.
There's the
That
song.
should-
There's
So-
the song.
Squatting, benching, deadlifting. Remember, either start from the floor up or from top to the floor.
Pick 2 cues. Stick with them for about a month until you nail it. If it's longer, whatever. And then move on from there.
Record your videos. Know what to look at. If you know your cues and where you're starting with your checklist, go down the list and just work on one of those things at a time, and you'll
Yep.
be good to go. As always, send us your videos. We'd be happy to help you out along the way, answer any questions you got.
Keep you accountable. Whatever you need.
And until then,
Hashtag shirtless summer.
Later,
hashtag
skaters.
shirtless summer. Peace.